This might be the most famous letter on Earth. It's the first letter in any language that uses the Latin, Cyrillic, or Greek script, which means it's the #1 letter for most of the world. We're even conditioned to associate it with a job well done due to the education system. As widespread as this letter is, it's virtually the same in every language. The Cyrillic version is called A and makes the sound A, or I won't say any more, as I don't want to accidentally anger the actual creators of this letter. There are an insane amount of Cyrillic letters that look like B. Some are common, some are rare. I like to call this one B with a hat in its uppercase form, or curvy B in its lowercase form. It's common in every Cyrillic using language. It's called B, and it sounds just like the B we know and love in English. B. This one looks like the Latin capital B. It's called V, and like Spanish, it makes a V sound. V. Depending on the word position, language, and dialect, the pronunciation can vary slightly, but it's still going to all be centered around the V. This Cyrillic letter is one of the weirdest. It appears in every language that uses Cyrillic, and it's most often called G, making the sound G. But in Ukrainian and Belarusian, it's called H, making the sound H. Depending on the language, dialect, and word structure, it can also sound like K or V. I like to call it the hangman letter, as its main sounds are G and H. But if you want to perfect your pronunciation, you'll have to do a bit of trial and error. This letter may look like a space invader, but its qualities really aren't so alien. It's used in every language that uses the Cyrillic script. It's called D, and it makes the English D sound. D. It's super easy to remember if you think of its resemblance to the Latin capital D or the Greek capital delta. If it comes at the end of a word, or after some soft consonants, it sounds more like T. But D and T are very similar sounds, so I wouldn't worry about it too much.
This letter can be recognized by a Greek philosopher, a Russian spy, a Chinese scientist, and an American frat boy. But what happens when you add an accent to it? It becomes a little less recognizable, as now it's a letter that only appears in Macedonian and some smaller minority languages. The letter is typically called G, and the sound it makes is something like G or D. The letter's shape is a guide to its pronunciation. You start with a regular G or D sound. Then, take the upper back part of your tongue and tap it on the roof of your mouth to produce that Y sound. All together, and it'll sound something like G.
This could very well be the most common letter in the world. Let's take a look at it in the context of the Cyrillic script. In most Cyrillic script using languages, it's pretty straightforward and consistent. It's called I and makes the sound I. But in the most widely spoken Cyrillic script language, Russian, as well as Belarusian and Mongolian, it's called Y, and in most cases it'll be pronounced as Y, like in the Russian word Niet. For those other scenarios where it should sound like I, like in the word Uzhe, many speakers will sneak in a little Y to round off their accent, making it Uzhe. There are even some situations where this letter will sound like yo or o, like in yesho. Sometimes there will be a diacritic to indicate this pronunciation, but it's not very common. At the end of the day, the pronunciation of this letter is going to depend on the language, dialect, and life experience of the person speaking it. So don't let its ambiguity stop you from trying to connect with your fellow souls. What might this symbol be? Is it an asterisk? No, you f***ing shithead. This special snowflake is a letter in the Cyrillic alphabet, and its name is Zhe. It appears in every language that uses the Cyrillic alphabet, and the sound it makes is similar to its name. That sound is Z. See how it kind of looks like someone sprawled out on an inner tube at a water park, getting some leisure time? Or maybe like someone laying on a beach somewhere, right under some buried treasure. Wait, what's that? Maybe pleasure is a better word to help remember its pronunciation? If you don't want to use any words to remember it, luckily its Latin equivalent is hidden right in the letter itself. Zh. While some TikTok users like to say, "It's just a number, bro," that sentence doesn't apply to this symbol. In the language of the universe, it is a number, 3, but in the Cyrillic script, it's also a letter. It's found in every Cyrillic script using language. It's called Ze, and it takes the sound of the English letter Z. Z. To remember the pronunciation when I see it in a word, I always think of a middle-aged Slavic man driving a BMW Z3. Z.
When I think of the Cyrillic script, I usually think of letters with lots of straight lines and right angles. So I was surprised to find out that this symbol, with no straight lines or right angles, can appear as a letter in some versions of the Cyrillic script. It's very common in Latin script using languages, and it was once common in Cyrillic using languages as well. However, its usage faded over time, and now the only Cyrillic alphabets that have this letter are those of Macedonian and some smaller minority languages. It can be called Z, And the sound it typically makes is something like z. But what about the sound that the Latin script version of this letter makes? That sound, s, is made by this letter in virtually every Cyrillic script using language. So, just hit it with a taser, z, and you'll have the pronunciation that this letter makes in Cyrillic. Z.
Looks can be deceiving in the Cyrillic alphabet. You might think that this backwards N makes a consonant sound, but really, it's a vowel. It's called E, and it sounds like E or I. It's used in every Cyrillic using language except Belarusian. In some alternate fonts, the letter can also look like this. Here's what goes on in my head when I see it in a word. It can also be a word itself, usually meaning and. Focusing on the middle part will help you remember how it's pronounced, but remember, it's only E or I, never I. This symbol is one of the most common characters in the Latin script, used on the western side of the globe. But did you know that it also appears in the Cyrillic script, used on the eastern side? Specifically in Cyrillic script languages that are used near the border of the Latin script world, like Serbian, Macedonian, Bosnian, Montenegrin, and other small minority languages. In these languages, the sound it makes is Y. In many of these languages, the sound a letter makes is also the name of the letter. But this one can also be called Y. Now, Y is one of the most common sounds in Cyrillic using languages. So why don't we see this letter in all of them? It turns out that this letter was actually borrowed from the Latin script. Ironically, it evolved from the Cyrillic letter E. But for much of history, Cyrillic users and Latin users didn't exactly get along. When the Cyrillic team saw that the Latin team was using this letter to make the sound Y, they wanted a letter like that of their own. So they doubled down and instead added an accent to their letter E. This letter now makes the Y sound for the majority of Cyrillic script users. It's nice to see that some users of the Cyrillic script can share a Y and chill out. Y. Most of the world knows this symbol. On its own, it's a brief but rude way to respond to a text. 2 of them and you have a guitar-playing dog. 3 together? Well, that's a group of sad boomers who never got enough love. Or a Brazilian internet laugh. But the beauty of this symbol is that no matter what language or script it's found in, it makes the same sound. K. In English, it's known as K, and in Cyrillic, it's called Ka. It's used in virtually every Latin and Cyrillic script using language, which means the majority of the world uses it every day. But no matter what you call it, it sounds like K. This lovely Cyrillic letter looks like someone lunging. It's enlisted by every Cyrillic using language, where it also can look like this. It's called L, and it sounds like L, 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 or L, which to me are literally exactly alike. Let's look at how I like to remember it. Just isolate the long, lanky left leg. It almost looks like a flipped Latin capital L, and you'll learn the pronunciation of this Cyrillic letter naturally. L. Check out this rare symbol. It's an uncommon letter in the Cyrillic script, and it's created by combining 2 letters that are a little more common. Its first half comes from this letter, which makes the sound easy to remember because it looks like a tongue curling to make that sound. The second half is this letter, which is an instruction to pronounce any consonant that precedes it with the back of the tongue on the roof of the mouth. Try pronouncing with the back of your tongue on or near the roof of your mouth. It should sound something like and can also be notated phonetically as. Oftentimes, people will call the letter by this sound, but it also can have the name. You'll only see this letter in Serbian, Bosnian, Macedonian, Montenegrin, and some smaller minority languages. It's crazy to think that a symbol like this is so well known to millions. When you see this letter, what language do you think of? Because of words like me, more, and mine, I tend to think of the consumerist West and the languages that are spoken there. I was shocked to find out that this letter also appears in Cyrillic script languages, and it makes the same sound as it does in the West. In the Cyrillic context, the letter's called am. It's used in every language that has the Cyrillic script, and the sound it makes is m. Be sure to note that the lowercase form of this letter is just a smaller version of the uppercase form, as this has a completely different meaning in some Cyrillic script languages. With this info in mind, get out there and make some ams today. If you want to learn this Cyrillic letter, you'll have to reprogram your brain again. This symbol can mean a few different things for us in the West, but our friends in the Far East all know it as N. It's used in every Cyrillic script using language, and it makes the sound m. As an English speaker, I just visualized turning the middle piece a bit to make it look like the N that I know. What's this strange-looking symbol? It's a relatively uncommon letter of the Cyrillic script. It only appears in Serbian, Bosnian, Macedonian, Montenegrin, and some other smaller minority languages. In these languages, the name of a letter is typically the sound that it makes, which in this situation would be ny, but it can also be called nya. Believe it or not, this letter was actually created by combining two traditional Cyrillic letters. This letter, which makes the sound n, and this letter, which adds the sound y to the ends of consonants. Put them together, and you get this letter's sound, n, which can also be represented as n phonetically. Because it's so hollow, I like to think of it as some kind of Cyrillic jalapeno. Just look at all that room for the seeds. N. Every human in the world knows this symbol. If I was a caveman and I found a stick in the woods, I'd probably draw something like this. Circles are within us. They say so much without ever speaking a word. Not only do they represent things like unity, perfection, and infinity, but they also appear naturally in the world around us. Since humans like to borrow ideas from nature for their own creations, it only makes sense that the circle exists as a letter in most languages of the world. In this part of the world, where the languages use the Cyrillic script, it's commonly called o. It makes the sound o, or and it's found in every language that uses the Cyrillic script. Isn't it a great thing to see how cultures overlap?
Many Cyrillic letters are derived from Greek. This one comes from arguably the most famous Greek letter of them all, pi. It's called pe. It appears in every Cyrillic using language, and it sounds like p. You could remember it by focusing on its similarity to pi, but be careful, as there's another Cyrillic letter that looks like pi as well. I remember how to pronounce it by noticing its resemblance to a perfect, peaceful staple.
I remember when I first saw the Russian word for Russia, Potsner. If you speak a Latin script language, this symbol only means one thing. P. In Cyrillic, the letter's called r, and it makes the R sound, r. If you're trying to learn a Cyrillic script language, you're going to see it a lot because it's in all of them. You can always override your brain's programming with some trusty mental spray paint. Focusing on the upper left-hand corner of the letter will help you remember how it's pronounced. R. If you're an English speaker, then you likely know this symbol as the letter C, and you know that it can make quite a few different sounds depending on the other letters that surround it. But what does this symbol mean to a Russian, a Bulgarian, a Ukrainian, or one of the many other people who use the Cyrillic script? To them, it's a letter as well, and it appears in every language that uses the Cyrillic script. In these languages, it's commonly called S, and it consistently makes the same sound. I was always confused seeing the Cyrillic acronym for the USSR, CIP. I later found out that it stood for Soyuz Sovietsk Sotsialistическая Respublika. What a mouthful. No wonder the Soviet Union was a mistake. Well, at least it helps me remember how to pronounce this letter. S. Here's another symbol that's shared by the whole world. It appears in some shape or form in almost every script on Earth. It's a staple in Latin, the most widely used script on the globe. It shows up all over the Chinese characters. And in India's two most common scripts, it seems to be in almost every letter. But in this video, we're going to take a look at its role in the Cyrillic script. This symbol appears on its own as a letter in every language that uses Cyrillic. It's commonly called te, and just like in Latin, it makes the sound t. In Cyrillic, for some reason, it can also look like this in alternate fonts. It's amazing to see how much we all have in common. People from different cultures sometimes don't get along because of history, poor leadership, or personal experiences. But underneath our different cultures, we're all members of the same culture, the same race. Human. So it should not be taboo to make jokes or critiques about your fellow brothers and sisters. Acknowledging our differences is what makes life worth living, but make sure to do it out of love. Studying a foreign language means time and effort put towards understanding and connecting with people completely different from you. It's a monumental exercise in empathy. If the whole world spoke the same language, we'd be one giant step closer to fixing the mess of the modern world. So keep studying and remember this letter. It looks like someone coming in for a hug, so use it to hug your fellow humans with words. And that's the t. Did you know that this very familiar letter can sometimes have an accent? If you're seeing it, it's likely as a part of the Cyrillic script, where it appears in Macedonian and some smaller minority languages. It can be referred to by the name kia, and the sound it makes is k or ch, as opposed to the unaccented version, which sounds like k. I always look at it as someone holding their Nokia phone, trying to get a signal. This is quite an interesting letter in the Latin script. Here's a list of some of the sounds it makes, and that's not even all of them. But in the Cyrillic script, this letter's much more consistent. It only makes one sound. In Cyrillic, the letter's called U. It's a crucial part of every Cyrillic script language. And guess what? Just like its name, the sound it makes is U. When I see it in a sentence, I completely ignore the bottom half like the gentleman I am, and I keep my eyes up here. The shape of the top part helps me remember the pronunciation. Ooh. Did you know that this is a Cyrillic letter? Although some might say, it was stolen from Greek, it's grown to global status. We can use this symbol as an example of our shared humanity. Besides, the Greek version looks a bit different anyways. As a global symbol, it appears as a letter in every Cyrillic script using language. In Cyrillic, it's called F or F, and the sound it makes is F. To help remember, I always think of phosphorus on the periodic table, or phosphor, as the sound appears twice, and the symbols look similar. After all, the periodic table was invented by a Russian guy. I guess that's a win for the Cyrillic script. Wait. Oh, what the f? This has to be the symbol with the highest amount of different meanings. From a kiss to a railroad crossing sign to just plain no, this symbol has countless different uses. It's only fitting that when used as a letter, it can signify many different sounds depending on the language that it appears in. When it appears in a Cyrillic script using language, it's typically called ch. It's used in every language that has Cyrillic, and the sound it makes is ch. I learned foreign languages by playing video games with native speakers. I found out from my investigations that in most Cyrillic languages, this letter is used to designate laughter. So it's not too hard to remember once you've seen it a few times. But don't be fooled. It's not ha ha ha. Instead, it's a more Slavic laugh. Ha ha ha. This little U with the tail makes the ts sound. It's pretty easy to remember if you think of the classic Russian word tsar. If that doesn't work, it does look an awful lot like Caesar Milan reaching down to nip the ear of a misbehaving dog. This upside down backwards lowercase h is a very common letter in the Cyrillic script. Its name is ch. It appears in every Cyrillic script using language, and it makes the same sound in all of them. Ch. While some Cyrillic characters look like Latin letters flipped sideways, ch is flipped both sideways and upside down. I remember how it's pronounced by imagining the noise a condescending snob would make after noticing that it's upside down. This letter doesn't even know which way is up. Ch. How embarrassing. Take a look at this strange symmetrical symbol. It's a letter in some versions of the Cyrillic script, where it appears in the alphabets of Serbian, Macedonian, Montenegrin, Bosnian, and some smaller minority languages. It can take the name j, and the sound it makes is j. You can remember its pronunciation because it looks like a bee with its stinger out buzzing around. J. It also kind of looks like a,
It's hard to be a human and not know about the multilingual onomatopoeia sh used to stop someone from speaking. GameLang, your videos are just ripped off from Wiki. In the Cyrillic script, that sound can be made with just one letter. It's called sha. It's used in every Cyrillic script language, and as you can guess, it sounds like sh. Other interjections like oh, huh, and wow are generally used in a short and blunt manner, but sh can be extended indefinitely. Shh. Conveniently enough, sha appears to be the Cyrillic letter with the longest horizontal distance. Focusing on the length of the letter helps me remember how it's pronounced. Sh.